When we talk about dangerous people, most of us imagine obvious types: criminals, violent individuals, or unstable minds who clearly show their chaos. But Carl Gustav Jung warned that real danger often doesn't look that way. The truly harmful personalities rarely appear wild or frightening on the surface. According to Jung, they often hide behind masks of goodness, morality, or even spirituality. They present themselves as confident, admirable people who seem to know what's right and wrong. They act certain of their values, appearing calm, collected, and in control. But behind this calm mask, something darker moves quietly. Jung observed that what these people have in common is their complete refusal to face their own darker side. They avoid it completely. Instead of accepting that they have flaws, fears, or destructive urges like everyone else, they deny them and throw them outward. They project those flaws onto others. They create enemies in their minds, point fingers, and blame the world for everything wrong. To them, they are always the good ones, the victims, the saviors, the righteous ones, fighting against what they believe is evil. And that's exactly what makes them so dangerous. They don't see themselves as the cause of harm. They truly believe they're doing the right thing. For Jung, this kind of blind conviction was one of the most alarming signs of all, because healthy people feel uncertainty. They hesitate, they reflect, they feel guilt and question their own motives. Dangerous personalities, however, do not. They walk through life with cold certainty. They never pause to question themselves, and that's what makes them capable of great harm. They can justify anything: their cruelty, their manipulation, their lies, all under the belief that their actions serve some higher cause, some moral duty, or even a personal truth. When this lack of self-awareness combines with natural charm or charisma, it creates a deeply destructive force. These people can seem inspiring, trustworthy, and morally upright, but underneath, they are driven by shadow impulses they refuse to admit exist. Jung called this state being possessed by the shadow. It means the person becomes so identified with their good side that they lose sight of the darkness operating within them. They become controlled by it, even though they believe they've mastered it. That's why such individuals are unpredictable and confusing. They don't see themselves as liars or manipulators. They see themselves as protectors, saviors, or heroes. They don't recognize faults, only certainty. And that's when they become truly dangerous, whether in intimate relationships, in positions of influence, or in ordinary social settings. Jung's goal wasn't just to warn people about these personalities, but to help us understand how to spot them clearly before they cause damage. Based on his observations, there are 3 unmistakable signs that reveal a truly dangerous person. This isn't some light pop psychology. It's a deep look into the human mind by one of the greatest thinkers of the modern age. If you can recognize these signs, you'll be able to see past the mask, to understand what's really happening beneath the surface. But more importantly, this knowledge also acts as a mirror. Because before we can spot these traits in others, we must learn to see them in ourselves. The best defense against manipulation and darkness from others is self-awareness, to know when we ourselves start falling into the same traps. Jung said that the first and most revealing sign of a dangerous personality is projection. Everyone projects to some extent, but for dangerous people, projection is their entire way of seeing the world. While normal people can admit their flaws, even if it's difficult, those dominated by their shadow do the opposite. They throw all unwanted traits out of themselves and see them only in others. It's like they carry a broken mirror. It doesn't reflect their own image. It only shows an exaggerated, distorted picture of others' mistakes. This kind of mindset quietly rewrites reality. Imagine someone who constantly calls others liars, manipulators, or selfish, but never once considers that they might be the same way. They can sound righteous, confident, even wise. To outsiders, they seem like someone standing up for what's right. But what's actually happening is projection, a way to avoid facing their own truth. They dump everything ugly inside them onto the outside world. Friends, family, co-workers, or even entire groups become scapegoats for what they refuse to see within themselves. Jung often explained that even idealistic or moral systems can fall into this trap when people completely identify with being the good side and put all evil outside themselves. This split, this black and white view of reality, is deeply destructive. It not only twists how the mind works, but also fuels fanaticism. People begin to believe they're fighting evil in the world, when in truth, they're fighting their own denied impulses. You can recognize this pattern everywhere. The co-worker who never admits fault but constantly highlights others' mistakes. The partner who plays the victim in every conflict, refusing to accept their role in the problem. The leader who claims to defend justice while secretly driven by pride, resentment, or a need for control. These are all faces of projection, and they're everywhere. When someone projects like this, they lose the ability to see themselves honestly. Every interaction becomes a stage for their narrative. They're always right, and someone else is always wrong. They don't lie consciously. They truly believe their version of reality, and that's what makes it so dangerous. It's not conscious deception, it's blindness. They don't know they're lying to themselves, which makes them immune to correction. You can reason with them because they can even see that there is another side. This lack of self-awareness kills growth, because change can only happen when someone admits, maybe I'm wrong. Without that, there's no evolution, only endless cycles of conflict. Jung described projection as the first warning sign, but there is a second one, that is even more unsettling: the total absence of inner conflict. Ordinary people question themselves. They make mistakes, feel guilt, regret their actions, and sometimes feel torn between right and wrong. That inner struggle is what makes them human. It's uncomfortable, but it's also what keeps us moral. Guilt and doubt act as natural brakes that stop us from crossing dangerous lines. They remind us that our choices have weight. Dangerous personalities, however, don't experience that. They move through life without hesitation. When they hurt others, they don't feel guilt. When they lie, they don't flinch. When they destroy trust or peace, they don't feel the smallest crack inside. This isn't confidence, it's emotional emptiness. It's as if their conscience has been silenced. They run purely on self-justification, no matter how much damage it causes. In his work, The Undiscovered Self, Jung warned how this kind of mindset can infect entire societies. During times of crisis, people with this internal coldness rise easily. They speak with total certainty, never doubting their views. They become political leaders, social influencers, or ideological figures who seem unshakable. Their conviction spreads like a virus, drawing in others who crave clarity or direction. While most people hesitate and think twice, these personalities move with frightening confidence, and that confidence often convinces others to follow them straight into destruction. On a smaller scale, in personal relationships, the pattern is just as harmful. Living with or dealing with someone who never feels inner conflict is exhausting. It's like arguing with a wall that always says, I'm right. No matter what happens, they won't truly apologize or reflect. They might say the right words to end an argument, but they'll never actually mean them. Deep down, they believe they are always the one wronged. You can show them proof, you can show them pain, but they'll never see themselves as part of the problem. That's why it's so dangerous, because there's no room for growth or connection. A person who feels guilt can change, but a person who feels nothing cannot. Their lack of hesitation becomes their armor, protecting them from self-awareness. And when that kind of armor meets authority or influence in a home, workplace, or government, the results can be devastating. Jung didn't stop there. He found a third sign that completes the picture of a dangerous personality: the inability to take responsibility. This trait goes deeper than just avoiding blame. It's not about making excuses once in a while. It's a full-time identity. These people constantly rewrite their story so that they're never the one at fault. No matter how clearly they caused harm, they'll reshape the memory until they look like the victim or misunderstood hero. They can manipulate facts, twist events, and even convince themselves that they were never responsible at all. This isn't about lying to others, it's about lying to themselves so effectively that the lie becomes their truth. A normal person might resist admitting guilt at first, but over time, they reflect and accept their role. They feel the weight of conscience and adjust, but a dangerous personality builds a mental wall against that process. They edit memories and feelings to protect their fragile image of perfection. They need to believe they're good. That's what their entire identity depends on. Admitting fault would shatter that illusion, so they never do it. This refusal to take responsibility becomes their survival mechanism. They live in a constant state of rewriting reality to protect their false image, and in doing so, they create pain for others and for themselves, without ever realizing it. Jung noticed something unsettling about these personalities. They can appear incredibly sincere. On the surface, they look like genuine, emotional, and even sensitive people. They speak with passion, show tears when accused, and seem deeply hurt by the idea of being misunderstood. But beneath that emotional performance lies something much colder, what Jung described as unconscious dramatization. They don't fake their feelings consciously. Rather, their mind automatically shapes every situation into a story where they are never at fault. The mask they wear adjusts itself perfectly to fit whatever version of the story keeps them innocent. This ability to make themselves look like victims or even martyrs is one of their most dangerous traits. It makes others lower their guard. It awakens sympathy, compassion, and guilt even in the people they've hurt. The more harm they cause, the more they appear wronged or misunderstood. This creates a psychological loop that traps everyone around them. In relationships, this dynamic becomes exhausting. Romantic partners end up constantly apologizing for problems they didn't start. Friends question themselves after every disagreement. Colleagues walk on eggshells, feeling responsible for someone else's emotional chaos. And in larger settings, families, workplaces, or communities, entire groups can fall under the influence of such individuals, believing their every emotional display is a sign of authenticity. In truth, it's not just a defense mechanism, it's a tool of power. By twisting emotions and rewriting events, they gain control over others. Jung warned that refusing to take responsibility doesn't make a person harmless, it makes them dangerous. Because the part of themselves they suppress, the resentment, pride, or aggression, doesn't vanish. It builds pressure inside, growing darker and more powerful. And eventually, it bursts out in unpredictable ways. The person keeps repeating the same destructive behavior, only each time it becomes worse. Jung saw this as an advanced stage of what he called shadow possession. The person becomes trapped by their own persona, the image they show to the world. They begin to believe completely in their own performance. The illusion of being good, pure, or morally superior becomes so strong that real self-awareness disappears. And when something even more frightening happens, they learn to wear a mask of perfect normality. This, Jung said, is one of the most dangerous transformations of all. Because now, the person no longer looks unstable, aggressive, or suspicious. They appear calm, pleasant, and perfectly well-adjusted. They blend in. They could be anyone, a friend, a boss, a teacher, or a public figure. They speak politely, smile often, and seem helpful. But behind that calm surface is emotional emptiness, a hollow space where genuine reflection and empathy should exist. Jung called this mask the persona, the false identity people use to function in society. Normally, everyone wears some version of a persona. It's a social tool. But when it's used to hide an entire side of one's personality, it becomes something darker, a weapon of deception. The mask becomes more important than the person underneath it. This makes such individuals incredibly difficult to detect. We instinctively stay cautious around someone who's openly aggressive or rude. But we rarely suspect someone who's charming, generous, and full of kind words. Jung wrote that the more perfect someone tries to appear, the more likely it is that they're hiding a deeply repressed shadow behind the performance. In real life, this explains why so many people end up saying, "I never thought they could do that." We see this in every context. Leaders who speak about justice and morality, but secretly exploit others' colleagues who act helpful, but subtly sabotage, or romantic partners who start off gentle and devoted only to turn controlling and cruel over time. The mask is their greatest weapon. It confuses people, attracts sympathy, and hides manipulation under politeness. The scariest part, Jung believed, is that society often rewards these masks. People who seem virtuous, confident, and articulate are admired, promoted, and trusted. We're taught to associate good manners and charm with good character. That's why such personalities thrive. They know how to play the role perfectly. They know how to make others feel seen and valued, all while pulling the strings behind the scenes. Jung's warning was clear. This kind of disguise is only possible when a person refuses to question themselves. Without self-criticism, there's no limit to how much someone can deceive both others and themselves. That's why self-awareness is not just a moral virtue, it's protection. The moment we stop questioning our own motives, we become vulnerable to illusion, either our own or someone else's. But Jung didn't stop at the mask. He said that once denial, projection, and false virtue merge together, something far more destructive emerges, a psychological state he called moral fanaticism. This is the final and most dangerous stage. At this point, The person doesn't just pretend to be good. They are completely convinced that they are good, that their way of thinking is the only truth. They stop pretending and start believing. Any disagreement feels like an attack. Any opposing idea feels like evil. They see those who question them not as people with different perspectives, but as enemies that must be corrected, silenced, or destroyed for the greater good. This is what makes moral fanaticism so terrifying. The fanatic doesn't think they're doing harm. They believe they're fighting for justice, purity, or truth itself. They lose the ability to doubt their own actions. Normal people, even when deeply convinced of something, still leave room for questioning, but the fanatic erases that doubt completely. Their conviction becomes absolute. An absolute conviction, Jung warned, is the clearest sign of shadow domination. Such individuals are not aware that their so-called mission is being fueled by the very darkness they refuse to acknowledge. They may speak about morality, integrity, or peace, yet their actions create the opposite. They become blind to the destruction they cause because their mind has rebranded it as doing what's necessary. Jung explained that this process isn't just personal. It can spread across entire societies. In The Undiscovered Self, he warned that during social chaos, when people crave stability and meaning, fanatical personalities rise easily. Their confidence is magnetic. They speak with total certainty at times when everyone else is confused, and that's why people follow them. Their certainty becomes contagious. It spreads through groups, movements, and nations like a psychological virus. When that happens, individual blindness turns into collective blindness. Entire communities lose the ability to question themselves. Every disagreement becomes a battle between good and evil. Every moral cause becomes a justification for cruelty. Jung called this the most dangerous form of possession, not by another person, but by the shadow of an entire group. But you don't need to look at history to see this pattern. It shows up every day in smaller forms, in people who use morality as a weapon. You'll find them in workplaces, families, online spaces, and friendships. They act as if they have the moral high ground, using guilt and virtue to manipulate others. They preach about fairness and honesty, but use those same words to control and humiliate. They constantly claim to be the good one, and they truly believe it. That's what makes them so convincing. These people aren't pretending to be pure. They genuinely believe they are. They've built an entire identity around being right. They can't see that what they call righteous anger is actually repressed hatred. They can't see that what they call protecting truth is just their ego defending itself from criticism. And since they never recognize their destructiveness, they never stop. The shadow within them grows stronger with every moral victory they believe they win. Jung said, this is when the shadow becomes fully dangerous, not because it's violent, but because it's disguised as goodness. The fanatic doesn't realize they're harming anyone. They don't question their motives because, in their mind, everything they do is justified. The danger isn't in their actions alone, but in their blindness to those actions. And when someone can harm others while feeling proud of doing it, there is no limit to what they might justify next. In this state, conversation becomes impossible. You can't reason with someone who believes their every word represents truth itself. They don't see themselves as individuals anymore. They become symbols of their own imagined virtue. Every argument reinforces their conviction. Every disagreement fuels their certainty. The more they are challenged, the deeper their delusion goes. That's why Jung insisted on the importance of awareness. Once the shadow fully takes over, the person believes they're following light, but it's actually their darkness guiding them. They've become puppets of the very thing they've denied all along. At this point, the question Jung wanted us to ask is simple but crucial. How can we protect ourselves from such people? And more importantly, how do we stop the same mechanism from taking over our own minds? This reflection leads to Jung's deeper purpose behind all his teachings, self-knowledge. He wanted people to understand that these psychological dangers aren't just about them out there. They're also about us. Every human carries a shadow, a side that prefers comfort over truth, ego over honesty. And the moment we stop acknowledging it, it begins to control us silently. Jung's message was never to demonize others, but to recognize the danger of refusing to see. A truly dangerous personality isn't born overnight. It grows step-by-step, projection first, then the absence of guilt, the refusal to take responsibility, the creation of a false persona, and finally, blind moral conviction. Each stage feeds the next, until the person becomes fully possessed by their shadow. They stop being guided by self-awareness and start being driven by unconscious impulses disguised as purpose. That Jung's method wasn't just about spotting dangerous people, it was also about preventing ourselves from becoming them. Because the truth is, the potential for darkness exists in everyone. The real danger lies not in having a shadow, but in pretending we don't. If you can see these patterns clearly, projection, lack of guilt, denial of responsibility, the charm of the mask, and the certainty of moral fanaticism, then you can begin to protect yourself from their influence. And even more, you can stop them from growing inside you. The most powerful defense isn't distrust of others, it's self-honesty. Jung believed that every step toward awareness weakens the power of the shadow. The moment you admit your flaws, you stop being controlled by them. The moment you question your own certainty, you free yourself from blind conviction. The moment you take responsibility, you break the illusion of innocence that fuels destruction. So the next time you encounter someone who seems too perfect, too righteous, or too sure of their truth, pause and observe. And also, look inward. Ask yourself, where do I project? Where do I avoid responsibility? Where do I hide behind the mask of being good? These are not comfortable questions, but they're the only ones that bring real safety. In the end, recognizing these patterns is not about judgment, it's about awareness. It's about learning to see clearly in a world full of masks. Jung's warning still matters today because the same psychological traps that shaped history still operate inside modern lives. The shadow doesn't disappear with progress, it simply changes shape. It hides in moral superiority, in social virtue, in the need to always appear right. By learning to see through these illusions in others and in ourselves, we begin to reclaim the one thing that truly protects us: consciousness, the ability to stop, reflect, and admit that we are not perfect, but we are capable of understanding. So, which of these signs do you recognize most clearly? Constant projection, the absence of inner conflict, the refusal to admit mistakes, the charm of false normality, or blind moral certainty? Think deeply and share your thoughts, because real growth begins with open dialogue. And if this reflection gave you something meaningful, consider sharing it with someone who needs it. Keep exploring, because in the next part of your journey, you'll uncover another layer of the human mind that connects directly to everything we've discussed here. Missing it might mean missing the key to understanding not just others, but yourself.